Welcome to Backstage with Becca B with special guest Jared Goldsmith. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Backstage with Becca B. On this episode, he's been performing since the age of 5. He got his start filming commercials before he began a voiceover career on Nickelodeon's Blue's Clues. Since then, he's graduated from Elon University with a BFA in musical theater. Shortly after, he was cast as Jared on the national tour of Dear Evan Hansen. He took his final bow on the national tour of Dear Evan Hansen in September 2019. But in October 2019, he joined the Broadway company of Dear Evan Hansen as Jared. Please welcome Jared Goldsmith. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Good. Doing really good right now.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. How have you been doing during this time? Because I'm sure this time has been weird for you.
It's like odd. It's odd for sure, but I feel like I've been trying to just keep busy with kind of my own stuff.
Yeah, and you had just made your Broadway debut shortly before the whole shutdown happened.
Yeah, I did. But it was with this show that I've been doing for a year prior.
Yeah.
So it very interesting experience for sure. Very, very, very odd. Obviously, did not expect the way it kind of ended to end that way.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're eager to get back to performing on stage.
Yeah.
When what you know is like performing on stage and then it suddenly like goes away, like it's like your universe probably turns upside down, kind of.
Totally. It definitely has been a very interesting like past year. But a lot of other cool kind of opportunities I feel like I've kind of created for myself. So I don't know, highs and lows for sure.
That's
I think
amazing.
it's a tough time for everyone for sure. Especially anyone working in theater, on
Yeah.
any side of it. So it's definitely it's odd for everyone.
For sure. And I've been saying that to everyone, theater people are so resilient. Like everyone's found a way to do virtual stuff via like Zoom platform, etc. It's been incredible. Like they've given theater fans something to watch during this time, whether it's like a pre-recorded musical or it's like a Zoom musical.
Yeah, when you really think about it, the technology that we do have at our hands and at our disposal to use, I think that overall people have really used it to the max and for a lot of good. They're at least as good as it can be. It's obviously not quite the same, but I think it's really been used quite well. Yeah.
Yeah, true. It's not the same because you're not in a room with other people, so you're not interacting face to face. It's over a computer.
Sure. But, at the end of the day, I think it's about those relationships, which you can still have that relationship with someone on Zoom. So a lot of it does translate over. So it is very fascinating.
I'm sure it's like a kind of a different, it's different acting that way a little bit, just a tiny bit, even though it does transfer over to Zoom. It's different acting and learning how to act via Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that slight delay, even, that you just have to kind of be used to, which I feel like people might carry over when they kind of return to life of that, just like waiting and listening, which maybe isn't a bad thing. Yeah, but it's been very interesting. Like I've even been taking Zoom acting class or acting classes via Zoom, and it was a class that was never on Zoom before. I only just started doing it while it was on Zoom because I was able to, just with timing, because they're based on the West Coast, and I was like, oh, I might as well give it a try. And it's so funny. I think I've just enjoyed doing it mainly to like feel like I'm practicing and like doing the craft of all that. But it is interesting how, like you were just saying, like a lot of that relationship, it transfers over and it translates on Zoom, but then there is also that like hiccup that you also deal with. And, nowadays people are having Zoom callbacks or even, just the self-tape world. So it's like you almost look out for those little like moments of real, like, oh, there's a glitch, there's a delay, and you kind of like use it to make it work or something. It's so funny what it's become now. But I like I was saying, I do think that there's kind of been a positive out of it all,
For sure.
in a weird way, I guess.
It's a whole learning experience.
Yeah.
So going back to the like beginning of your career, have you always known you wanted to be a theater performer, first of all?
I think there was definitely a bug in me for sure, that always was drawn to theater or performance in some aspect. Definitely, I think the live theater jumped out at me. Like whenever I, as a really little kid, would see a live performance of some kind, I think I really found that to be like a special experience. So I think there was always some part of me that wanted that. Yeah. Uh, and I guess I was performing a lot as a kid in either like I did some voiceovers when I was a kid, or even commercials when I was really little, and kind of kept that, I guess, fire or performance drive in me, and a lot of, I would always do the shows at my school, or I went to theater camp for many summers, just kind of uh, I think I wanted to immerse myself with other people that were also interested in that. So I think it was living in me for a while, before I had even kind of gone to college or had decided what I really wanted to study.
Do you remember what the first theater show you ever saw was?
I think actually the first live performance I ever saw was a production of Pippin at my high school, or
Oh,
in my town, when I was probably like 3. And I definitely didn't really know a lot about it, but I think I definitely like remember listening to the music and enjoying the music, and then like hearing the cast recording, like the original cast recording, after that, and like listening to it kind of a lot. So I think that definitely was like a big part of it for sure. And then like I think I was only maybe 5 years old when I'd seen the revival of Chicago,
oh,
which at that point was probably playing for a few years, and still was playing before the shutdown, obviously. So I think that kind of stuck with me. And yeah, I'm trying to think back now. There were a few of those shows that I think definitely they jumped out at me. And
yeah.
I'd seen my sister perform as Annie in
Oh,
Annie when she was like maybe 10 and I was 5. So I think it was kind of all around that time, like seeing,
yeah.
I'd loved watching the movie Annie, as a
Same.
kid, but I think seeing my sister actually perform as Annie and being like, oh right, this is something that people actually do. That's like it was kind of a different, almost mindset of like, it's not just a hobby, or it's not just something that, I don't know, is necessarily done for fun,
Yeah.
but people actually can do
Agreed.
it. So I think that kind of stuck with me, and I kind of just wanted to do it.
I love that Annie is such a big part of a lot of theater kids' childhood. Like that was my favorite thing growing up. It got me into theater as well. What was your favorite Annie song? I have to ask because Annie's iconic, I feel like.
I actually really liked NYC.
Yes,
And I remember always being kind of upset it wasn't in the movie. Uh,
the
but I
92.
also really liked Let's Go to the Movies as well. So I think I was just kind of a nerd for all that.
Yeah, I mean, I watch all the Annie movies and like I compare and contrast them, and I'm like, okay, so this one is the best because it has this song in it, but like the 1982 one has like some extra songs in it, and it's just,
Right.
I mean, and it has all the dancing too, so it's like, wow.
Agreed.
Who realized like that you could do this as a career in your family and like kept like saying, hey, you should go forward with this. If you want to go forward with this, then you should go forward with this.
I think I don't think my parents like necessarily encouraged, but I think they saw that I really liked it and weren't discouraging at all, and they were very supportive, in a way of just like, yeah, I think you have an interest in this, and like, go for it, follow your dreams. I don't know, I think they also sort of helped when I was young, sort of find like I had a child manager that kind of was helping me throughout elementary school when I was really little. But I think my parents also kind of wanted me to have a seemingly normal upbringing of not being too distracted. Like they were kind of like, yeah, maybe if you're in like some movie that shoots for a couple weeks, you can go do that, but like maybe not like a big series where you have to like uproot your entire life and like go to LA as a child and like do that whole thing. I think they sort of wanted to balance it out a little, and I think that's why I ended up doing a lot of these like voiceover gigs and commercial things where it would be like you leave school for a weekend or for a few days and you're not missing too much. So that's kind of I think where I was at that point. This is like when I feel like baby, like single
Yeah.
digit, really little, like under 3 feet tall, like really little kid. But I think all that kind of stuck with me, and I think that was maybe part of why it was like by the time I was in high school, it was like, all right, I'll focus on being a high school student. I'll apply to college. I'll do that thing, and I ultimately wanted to go to college and study theater and performance in some aspect. Eventually finding out I really wanted that like BFA track, that kind of classic, like just conservatory style training. So I think I still had that kind of bug of like, well, I haven't gotten to do something Broadway yet. I've done, some film and dabbled in that as a kid. But I think I had that sort of Broadway bug in me because I think, again, that was one of those other ones where it was like, even as a little kid, I remember auditioning for like Mary Poppins and Billy Elliot and those things. But I think my parents also were, as supportive as they were, a little weary of the like, oh, just know this is that it's a different type of life, I grew up in New Jersey, not far from the city at all either. My parents would commute to the city every day before COVID, like literally before COVID, just working, just commuting and working. And now it's all remote for them. But they were very much, this can work, but you're gonna have to go out of the city every night, and it's gonna be a different life for you. So I think it was part of that almost like hesitation, I guess, as a youngster. And looking back, I actually am really happy that it kind of all worked out the way it did. Of like getting to kind of perform on tour and on Broadway as like a 21, 22-year-old, kind of a little no, not tied down to anything. Like that timing of just kind of post college, it seemed
Literally
perfect. Just seemed a lot. Yeah, it just seemed to time out a lot better for me. So I'm really happy that all worked out the way it did.
And speaking of college for musical theater, there's a lot of competition to get into any musical theater program at any school around the country.
Totally.
Know. How did you prepare? How did you feel prepared to go into audition? You went to Elon University, which I know a couple people who have gone there. How did you prepare to go in and to audition or get into that program?
Yeah, at this point, I'm talking like I'm 17, I guess. I think, I was really winging it for sure. I was using whatever experience and training I had at that point. But again, like you're talking child, like legitimate child, and any training / experience as a child, like carrying over. So, I a lot of it I think was making it up as I went. I had a lot of help from any vocal or chorus teachers that I had at that point in my life. But I did very much the classic like audition for 15-ish schools, and I remember it was a very intense year. I really give a lot of credit to any student like doing that now or going through that audition process now, especially during this whole COVID time, because it's like I'm sure the virtual auditions or whatever has to be done has not been easy on any of these students. But I think really for my preparation, I kind of was like, I'll figure it out. And I know I a lot of, I like I was saying, I went to Stage Door. I went to theater camp for about all of my summers as a kid, from like the ages of 10 to 18, pretty much. So I kind of felt like I had that experience at least, and definitely had given me some confidence as a very young performer. Though I definitely was itching for that raw training, that like those true like vocal lessons and like the technical like acting class that I just hadn't quite gotten, and most children really don't have access to until they're at that kind of like 17, 18 level anyway, and they're going off to school and they're ready for it. So, I think I'd prepared as well as any 17-year-old applying for those programs. It is very competitive. It's not easy, I have to say. And I kind of knew that and sensed it going in, and kind of was like, I will figure it out. I'm happy. Again, I'm happy it worked out the way it did. Like looking back, I think, if I was to give myself any piece of advice, it would just be to not stress so much about all of it. I think I'm a person that gets very wound up in all this stuff, probably to the nth degree. And there's a lot of things you just can't control. And I think the college auditions are so interesting because never again in your life will you really have an audition that's quite like that, where it's for some select or specific program and not for a specific role or film or show or whatever. But they're interesting because I think they give you a sense or a taste or a flavor of almost what's to come. And then, I feel like that cycle goes, it's, you're in college, and then it's like the summer stock auditions, and then it's like you're graduating college, and it's the real world audition. So it definitely is practice for that, that lifestyle and career. Because as you're aware, it's that kind of artist actor track. It's more, creating your own avenues and auditioning for things that are then interrupted by jobs. So that's just kind of the way I guess actor artist model works.
And you seem like a very positive person, so that probably helped you with the audition for the schools you auditioned for in the long run, because they were probably like, oh, well, he's like really serious about this. He wants to do this, and he's positive about it, and he's gonna like go after it and like not give up. So like he's gonna be an A+ student. Why did you end up choosing Elon University, and what was the biggest takeaway that you learned at that school that helped you prepare for, Dear Evan Hansen?
Yeah, Elon was not totally on my radar. If I'm being honest, I had heard about it. I had known maybe one or two kids that had gone from stage door at that point, but it was starting to explode just as I was auditioning and going there. It was one of the, again, I think my guidance counselor, someone was like, yeah, maybe take a look at this school. And they ultimately, they gave me a call, like it was, in March of my senior year. And they were like, we really want you to join the class and, or the incoming class. And, we loved you in all the rooms. And there was a way they just made me really feel welcome, and this like kind of warm, friendly, welcoming. And the campus was just kind of beautiful, and everything seemed totally perfectly buttoned up. I'd only visited when I auditioned in person, at least when I was doing it. It might be different now. You had to audition in person on campus, and that was it. So I don't know. And I remember going down in this big snowstorm, and like I got to North Carolina, and like it was not as cold, and it was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I don't know. There was something that just they had called me, and they were like, we really want you. And I was like, there's something that feels kind of right about this. I liked the vibe that I got when I went down there, even though I didn't know too much about it going in, but ultimately I learned so much. I felt like if we're talking like the actor, singer, dancer buckets for that classic musical theater training, I really picked up, some raw acting technique. Like my voice, I feel like just totally soared and improved. Like I was not much of a singer going in. I kind of yelled on pitch, I feel like, and I got like a real technical like training and just like this 4-year boot camp with like an incredible voice teacher. And in terms of the dance and movement, I really was not much of a mover even. But when I was auditioning and going in, I really had like 2 left feet, and I feel like I was taking dance 5 days a week. And really working on kind of my alignment and just basic technique. And in all dance aspects, not just ballet and jazz, but like tap, we had really good tap training. And I'd say the overall kind of message or thing I really took away was kind of embracing myself and kind of, whatever my unique qualities were, and just kind of honing in on that really specifically, and just being like, I'm going to be the absolute best Jared that I can be, because there's not another Jared that's me. So I just kind of really went with that, and really tried to not compare myself and look to the sides too much, as tough as that is. And it's kind of this constant reminder, I feel like, for everyone. I just really tried to embrace that. And I think that is what I still try and like live to today. And I think it's definitely been helpful. And I think it did carry over into, auditioning for shows like Dear Evan Hansen, and just kind of even in the workspace for a show like that, just kind of really being me and being Jared, and not to even confuse with like Jared 1 and Jared 2, which is a totally different conversation regarding the musical Dear Evan Hansen that has a character named Jared in it that I played, but kind of not the point.
But I mean, you're young going into college, so it's important. You talk about like you felt comfortable when you went and auditioned in person at the school, and like it kind of felt like home the minute you like stepped on campus. Like that's so important. Someone so young who's stepping into like this big college universe, who's like, okay, where do I go from here? I'm supposed to be an adult. I'm only like about to turn 18, barely 18. Like there's a huge world ahead of me, and I feel like a little small fish right now.
Yeah, it can be a little intimidating, totally. And I recall, even just that beginning of looking kind of to the side and being like, oh my gosh, well, this kid is like, amazing at this, and this person's amazing at this, and what am I good at? And it's like, oh, well, I'm just myself, and it's okay, and I'm gonna really stick to that. Was kind of, I think, what I ended up really learning and embracing. And I don't think it was instantly either. I think I got that warm, welcoming feeling when I stepped into the campus and some of those different spaces, like visiting. But I think that was, that learning to kind of embrace me thing, I think was something that took a couple of those years to develop. It wasn't just like this, one semester and done type of thing. But I would highly recommend it to anyone who is highly considering that BFA degree. It's definitely up there on the list of great places for sure.
Yes. And you started Dear Evan Hansen National Tour the same year you graduated?
Yeah, the tour was actually launching the fall of that year.
Wow.
So timing just really was a little too perfect at that point. It just kind of really timed out well, where I knew they were casting that tour, and I was able to kind of audition for it as I was graduating, and kind of had that lined up, which was really, really fortunate. And I know that doesn't happen to most folks, although even at Elon, there were tons of people who would graduate and then like, a month or a few months later, it's like, oh my God, they're in Hamilton now. But
and your dreams can come true.
Yes. So, it does, those things do happen, but I also recognize that like the way it kind of worked out for me was a little crazy. And it doesn't always work out like that. But that was kind of just the fun of it. And, I was trying to just not ask questions and kind of keep riding the wave, so to speak.
What had you heard about Dear Evan Hansen? Because like it was popular at that time when you were auditioning. I'm sure it was already at the popular places where everyone and Tony, etc. And I mean, everyone was talking about it who loved musical theater. Everyone was talking about waving through a window. What had you heard about it, and had you seen the show before going into audition?
Yeah, so at this point, I saw it maybe my sophomore year of college when it was at Second Stage. and really fell in love with the show a lot. The inside joke is that my best friend who I met at theater camp when I was 9 and was 11 ended up working on this new musical as an associate or assistant to the director from this early like second stage when it was at second stage. And he was like, dude, I'm working on the show, Dear Evan Hansen, like you got to come see it. Like it's really good. I think it's like one of the best shows I've worked on. And he went to Michigan. This is my friend Adam. He went to Michigan for directing. And so not for performance, but always kind of wanted to be on a different side of the performance table. So he had actually introduced it to me, and I'd seen it, and I'd sat like maybe a couple rows in front of him, and he was with the director, and they were scratching notes, and then like little did I know I would be doing this show only like 2-ish years later. So yeah, by the time I went in for my like final callback, he was sitting in there and kind of like stayed silent and like didn't say anything or didn't say that he had known me, and we kind of just didn't look at each other and didn't cross paths. So that's the kind of like funny inside joke, and then we got to work on the show together, and it was funny because he like got to give me notes here and there, and like he was my he's my best friend, so that was funny. And we've been writing a musical together for the past like 4 or 5 years as well. We've had a lot of creative kind of endeavors together. So that was definitely really fun. So I was familiar with the show for sure. When I had auditioned, I'd seen it once. But other than that, I mean, I think my knowledge to the inside of the show was pretty much as known as anyone else's. Like it was, if you had seen the show, I definitely think, at least for that show, which is very plot specific, it would probably be easier to audition for than having not seen it. But not necessarily. I think it kind of works for other folks. The girl Phoebe, who was playing Alana with me, hadn't seen the show until after she had auditioned, and I was like, wow, that's wild to me. Because I feel like I just wouldn't have, I personally wouldn't have known what was going on, but that's really just me. I don't think it really matters.
What stuck out to you about the show when you saw it, that like when the audition came up that you were like, okay, I have to audition for this. Like I can't let this go.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I definitely liked the score a lot. I thought it felt, contemporary and almost like, something that could blend into a pop sound, but was also very like theatery as well. I think it was just kind of the way it all worked together in terms of the story and music. It felt very original and unique to me. And I think the way, and now we're talking already like 5 years ago when I had first seen it. But the way the social media was kind of implemented into the actual plot, in many ways, I felt it was kind of the first Broadway musical that was about social media, which I think is kind of an interesting big deal in a way. Like the plot can't forward without some of that stuff. So that I think was very interesting, and I think the way it was kind of utilized in the production itself in terms of the projections and all that, I think that was actually really cool, and it was something that I felt like I hadn't seen before. So it felt very new and it felt very original, and I think that's what kind of was drawing me to it. At that point, it was like there was Hamilton and there was Dear Evan Hansen and like a lot of other shows that either had like a score that might have been known or a film that it might have been the basis as the original source material. I definitely feel like I've always been craving like original stuff these past few years. But that's just kind of me. I think that's what stuck out for me.
And I mean, you were going on tour like with the first national tour cast. So you all were starting the tour at the time.
Yeah, that was a really cool experience too, because it was like kind of being the first cast to bring it to these different cities. And that was just cool. I mean, it was cool, like being the first, starting that tour, getting to actually work with one another in a rehearsal room, I think the process of opening a first national is definitely different than what I had learned kind of that year and a half later of sort of stepping in and being a Broadway replacement for an already running production. Even though the show was exactly the same and the dialogue and the text is pretty much all the same, it was more just, when we're opening that tour, we had the full company in that big rehearsal room, even doing book work with the writers and, occasional, talks about rewrites or, is GoFundMe going to be Kickstarter, etc., stuff like that. So I don't know. I think just getting that energy of opening a new company and kind of really working off of each other and getting to bounce and play off of each other in that rehearsal room and doing that tech process and that opening process, I think that really tightened up the company for sure. So I'm really happy I got to have that experience as well. But the Broadway replacement experience was also really cool. And it was kind of like, all right, this is what already exists. We know you've been doing the show for a year. We know you've been doing the show, a few of you together for a year, but there's also going to be some new folks joining in with you. So it will be different. And you still have to, a lot of it's a balance, with this show, we would never stop getting notes. We were always getting notes. We could have done the show 500 times. You're still getting notes,
Still new.
The Evan Hansens were getting notes before their final performance. Just, it kind of was what it was. Because they wanted to always keep the show fresh and always continue to challenge us and ask questions. And, as much as there are certain things that work, you got to check in with yourself where you're at each day. You want it to be authentic. You want to truly live those moments as if they're really happening. So, it was just kind of this balance of doing what works, but also making sure it's authentic and present and totally, listening and responding on stage just organically. So that that is also a whole other beast, the whole note taking and keeping up that 8 show a week stamina, and especially in a show like that, which is more kind of acting based, scene heavy. It's demanding in a different way of the 8 company members or the 8 on stage members.
Before I get into the acting and the singing and the performing part of the show, speaking of social media, as someone who saw it, I've seen it twice on the tour, and that's all. I haven't seen it on Broadway yet. But I mean, I saw it at Amundsen. I think it was really early on when the tour opened, if not one of the first stops. Did you read the hype on social media before the tour started? Because I know there was a lot of hype.
I remember people were talking about it for sure. And I remember it was a big deal that it was kind of coming to LA for the first time, which was really cool. Like I was saying, it was cool to be bringing the show to all these different cities. And they were all kind of expecting and awaiting our arrival, which was really cool. But yeah, I remember people were hyped up about it, and it was only, I think that was our second stop. So I think we went to Denver to tech the show, and then we went to LA it was a couple of weeks. It was maybe 6 weeks, which was a nice long stop, which you don't always get on tours. It's kind of depending on how, but this was it was this first production tour, and it was going to do a couple longer sit downs in these cities. So it was a nice balance for sure, of kind of, I think over the course of a year, it was maybe 25 different cities, which is a lot, but it also, there was a good balance of, a week long stops, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, just depending. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was definitely a lot of fun.
In rehearsal process for the tour, did they change anything from the Broadway production? Did you get to be a part of anything that was different for the first time?
And we experimented with a few different things. Really 99.9% of it stayed the same. I think some of the main differences, the Broadway stage itself is smaller. The deck is just built a little smaller for that theater. It's also raked in the Broadway house, so it's slanted a little bit, and that's mainly for sight lines for the floor projections, which I won't get into too much detail about. But on tour, the stage is big enough and the houses are usually far back enough where you can see those floor projections anyway. Most of it's really the same. It's the same show. It's the same dialogue. There were talks of, like I was saying, kind of tweaking things here and there, and maybe some things did ultimately get tweaked, a word here or there or a line here or there. But really, for the most part, the show was the same. But it was bringing a lot of that creative team back just to make sure it was all good to go and play in every city correctly. And then the interesting thing was seeing how, how each kind of line and scene and the show in general would just sort of be received in each city. And a lot of it, I think, was just based on how cities would react in theaters. Like I remember Minneapolis was just super vocal and would love to laugh. And they were loud laughers, which was like always great for any of the small jokes. And then I remember like in Chicago, it was like not the same as that. And I think that just was an energy thing of like how those audiences typically go to the theater and respond to theater. So that was fascinating as well.
It's like performing
play each house.
Sorry, it's like performing in America versus like performing overseas, kind of.
Sure, totally. Yeah, there are differences. I mean, if you've been overseas, even just sitting in an audience, you know there's something that feels different. Like I feel like the standing ovation isn't quite as popularized there the way it is on Broadway. But I don't think that's like, the people aren't enjoying it. I think that's just sort of a theater thing. I'm not sure.
It's what they're used to over there. So like, I mean, people are going to copy what they see from other people at theater shows they go to. And that's the routine in overseas.
For sure.
So your character in Dear Evan Hansen shares your name. How do you separate yourself from the character when playing that character?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know it's like not easy, but it's kind of I think the biggest thing for me, and I think for all the actors in that show that we kind of learned, is like it's best to sort of leave the show at the theater each night after you bow and take off your costume and like are headed home. Because that show itself is intense and it is a little emotionally taxing for all the characters. I have Jared is sort of the comic relief of the piece, which is important in a different way. It provides that light and that levity and that like almost setting the audience up so that they can feel comfortable because they've laughed with you, that they're able to kind of go a step further on an emotional journey and cry along with you as well. I think, all the actors, and especially the ones playing Evan, would agree, like, it's easier for me to do the show when I'm having a good day rather than like having a bad day and trying to use my bad day as like some acting thing. Like it's usually easier when you're like centered and having a good day to kind of perform, even if you have to get to a bad place, in a way, I guess. So again, I think a lot of it was just leaving that show at the theater, and really trying to separate just that Jared 1 and Jared 2. Obviously I like see some similarities in myself and the character, and I think that's why I was cast as the character, and I've played the character, and I've definitely embraced him as my own. I like to think I'm a little nicer than Jared Kleinman, although I think there are probably more similarities to my 17-year-old self and Jared, who is a 17-year-old, than myself that was playing him kind of a few years after that. That's just my own kind of take on it, I think. But yeah, I think leaving the show at the theater is just always an important practice. It's best to not marry those two worlds too much, I think.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, Jared's a teen, and like, yeah, there's mistakes made in the show, but like all of the teens make mistakes, and that's part of teenager life, I feel like, is making mistakes, kind of embracing those mistakes and kind of figuring out like how you can get better and how you can learn from your mistakes that you've made in life.
Indeed. I think they're humans, they're human beings. Yeah. Humans are not perfect, they're not automatons, they make mistakes. That's why I love acting, because I think it's all about humanity, and like you can be a perfectly imperfect human, and that's what is captured, on stage or in cinema, like just you being imperfect. And I think
Yeah.
that's totally okay, and it's just totally natural.
Before I get into when you went to Broadway with Dear Evan Hansen, I want to ask, how did you have a routine? Because you're performing 8 times a week and traveling. Did you have a routine to like keep up the stamina on tour and like keep up your mood and like make sure you
Yeah,
get
I,
rest?
I think the routine was a little roll with the punches, but it also was sort of that like fire of like I was definitely like eager to go and like kind of
Yeah.
game for anything at that point. Uh, yeah, I definitely was kind of into that routine of like, all right, get into the new city. I'm in my hotel or Airbnb or wherever I'm at, and I can get to the gym and make sure I'm like feeling good and I'm feeling energized and worked out and like ready to do the show at night. Maybe exploring the city during the day if I'm there only a week or a couple weeks, to kind of check things out. There was always like a checklist of like, what do I have to see? And that was the cool part about touring too, like, trying out different eats at different restaurants, or seeing different landmarks or museums or wherever it was that you like had to go in that one city. You got to try this ice cream place, or you got to see this museum. So that was definitely like a fun aspect of touring, like getting to literally see the country and kind of go to these different places. Yeah, I mean, but the routine also, it depended. Your off day was usually a travel day, but it also depended just on what week it was. If you're only there a week, if you were there 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So, if you're sitting down one place for 4 or 5 weeks, you don't have to travel for the next few weeks. But if it's only a 1 week stop, then you're traveling again that next week. So a lot of it was just kind of rolling with the punches and seeing what the schedule was. But it was really making my own schedule kind of work toward whatever that tour schedule was. But the tour itinerary was very buttoned up. I mean, it was really buttoned up and really tight schedule for sure. There's something nice, I think, as well about like having, you're kind of off on tour and you kind of can do your own thing and you can create that schedule, whether it's, you want to sleep in till X time because you were up late till, because you finished the show at 11 and you're up till 1 and you're wired up and you can't quite get to sleep yet. You could live that as well. So a lot of it was just kind of balancing that out. And I think a lot of the scheduling sort of depended on what city I was in and what environment it was. Like, in March, we went from Chicago to North Carolina down to Florida, and it was like, super cold down to like summer again.
Right.
So, obviously in Fort Lauderdale, I was like, well, I want to go to the beach a couple days. So a lot of it, I think, depended on where we were and like what the environment was as well. And that also was a whole beast in, keeping up with your own stamina. Ultimately I wanted to stay healthy and like be well rested enough so that I could do the show each night. I really like prided myself on, I wanted to do the show, and, I didn't want to get sick and not have to do the show. I was there to do the show. I only ended up calling out, I think, once. And
Wow.
I took a vacation, and I made sure I was just kind of well rested, and I think a lot of that was due to the training I had of just like keeping up with myself and making sure I'd be okay enough to do the show, just well enough to perform. But yeah, the different environments, going from Chicago to Florida within the few weeks of super dryness, super humid, that also is taxing on
Allergies.
the voice and the allergies for sure. I went to school in North Carolina. They say it's some of the worst allergies in the world down there, in that region. I remember like my car would have just a clear dust of pollen on it. You could write your name in it. So, it was just kind of working toward a lot of that. But I think I think going to school and practicing that allergy stuff in North Carolina made it so that I was like, all right, I can do it anywhere.
Handle it.
But of course, the change of environment constantly is tough as well.
I know what you mean. I'm in Texas and it changes every day here. So it's like allergies nonstop, and I'm not even leaving my city, like the city I'm in right now.
Wow.
Like,
yeah, it's that time of year now too.
Yes. What was your favorite stop on tour that you went to?
Oh my gosh, I did really love LA. I thought that was really cool. I'd never been to LA at that point, and I'd wanted to for sure. So that was fun, and like going to Disney and all those things. And of course, then we went to Orlando, also going to Disney. So that was
Oh
fun.
my goodness, 2 Disney.
Um, we did it was a big Disney year for sure. Uh, so that was fun. I liked Boston a lot. We were there over the summer, and that was kind of just a fun time. I enjoyed DC. We were performing at the Kennedy Center, which was a lot of fun,
That's
just kind
iconic.
of being at that historic place. San Francisco was also really cool. We were at a pretty historic theater there, and that was a fun city. It was around the holiday time. I liked really all the cities for different reasons, for sure. Uh, I'm trying to think.
What was
Yeah,
the best? Where was the best audience?
or was the best audience? Ooh, I don't know.
Sure, it's hard.
Maybe where?
I'm sure it's hard to come up with the best
Yeah,
audience.
I don't know. Maybe LA. Maybe LA had a really good audience. They definitely wanted to laugh, and they were ready to be there. Um, yeah, I don't know. Denver was also really cool. That it was the start at that point. Uh, really, I like them all for different reasons. Um, and it was it was a fun marathon, so to speak, of just kind of you gotta stick to it and just kind of keep going. And it's tough. It was definitely tough, but it was a good tough, and it was a fun tough.
Yes. Disney World or Disneyland?
Actually, I think I prefer Disneyland, to be honest.
Really?
And I think that's just because it feels a little more manageable. There's probably something a little more magical about Disney World, but I liked being able to just kind of waltz between the two parks, and it was like super easy and right there for you. Whereas like at Disney World, it's like you can't just go to Magic Kingdom. You got to like take a ferry or a bus or a train or a monorail or something. Like Disney World is just so big. But that was also a fun week. We were only there 1 week, so everyone was we were sort of
Oh
trying to run around the parks, but also it was like I didn't want to get sick and I wanted to
no. Yep.
be rested. So again, definitely a balance.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So it's like you got a little less time in Disney World to like kind of like manage, like go to all the parks and go see all the attractions. I feel like
Yeah, I
because
mean, ultimately, I wasn't there for Disney World, but I
sure,
was there, so I was gonna check it out.
sure. Yes, yes. So when did you hear that you would be going to Broadway with the role of Jared?
That was, I guess, maybe midway through the tour when sort of it was like time for sort of contracts to either be renewed or talk about what that future would look like. And it was at that point they'd liked what I was doing. They'd liked the work I was doing with the show. And I kind of was, I think I was certain I didn't want to I didn't want to stay on the tour past that 1 year. I think I definitely felt that I liked the tour, but a year was going to be enough. And I think most of us at that point did choose to leave. If we were performing on stage each night, we chose to leave the tour after a year, just because it is a lot, I think, to be traveling and performing 8 times a week. So it was sort of partially with that, and it was like, well, we'd love to have you join the Broadway company as well. And a couple of us joined the Broadway company. I joined, Phoebe joined, who was playing Alana, Christiane was playing Cynthia, and Jess, who was playing Heidi, later joined as well. So that was about like half of the tour company that became the Broadway company later. And it was kind of just like, I think that happens a lot typically with tours and Broadway shows. Someone knows the track, they fit in the costume, they can kind of send it over, and it works, then they know it works. So I think they were just kind of trying to do that. But it was fun. Both were very fun for different reasons. And both were very similar. I miss, there were certain groups that, like the backstage and the tech groups and the stage management teams and the company management teams, like those are all different between companies, which was odd to me, because I built such a close relationship with those folks on tour. But I also had met a lot of the Broadway folks, you know, in the backstage, you know, the stage managers and company managers and those folks prior to leaving the tour before the tour really launched. So, you know, it was almost like kind of coming back home and being with those folks again. So yeah, I mean, it was a very exciting announcement to hear that I was kind of able to come home and sort of do the show in one place.
Yes.
Like I was saying, as much as I did love performing on tour, I think after about a year, which was solid, it was nice to kind of settle into one location. And I do recommend, like, if any actor is given the opportunity to tour, like, do it. I think it's a great experience. I think every actor would benefit and would love to tour at one point if given the opportunity. And I think a year is probably like the max for that. But that was just me. Some people, they tour for years. There are people crew that were like, I've been on tour for 14 years, you know, and I like it, and I kind of go where the show goes, and I'll bounce from show to show. And some people love that. And I understand how some people really get into that routine, and they like it. And I didn't dislike it. I just didn't want it forever. And maybe that was just kind of the fire in me that was like, yeah, I want to get back to a stationary place and kind of have a life as well. So I think that's understandable too. You know, some of the adults had children and on tour, and it was very understandable. They'd want to, you know, be with their kids and not traveling. I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, and you have to like fly your family out to like see you on tour, and it's like, I mean, it's expensive for them, and not only you, it's expensive for them, and you're I mean, I'm sure tour covers it. I don't know the money that goes into it, but like tour covers it, but you're also booking your like places to stay every month, and that probably gets stressful too.
Yeah, you know, there are a lot of logistics that go into it, and you're taken care of for sure. Like you're saying, you're really taken care of, but it is a lot of planning, and you know, you gotta, you know, if you're all right, am I staying in one of the company hotels, or is there an apartment, or is there an Airbnb? And it's like you are doing that for every city, but eventually you do kind of get into that routine, and you kind of just like
used to it.
And you just do it. And a lot of people get really into it and they have fun with it. And they're like, oh, I'm going to live here in this city. It's going to be fun. And, you know, I'm going to live with this person. And, you know, there are ways to really make it fun. So I think I found a lot of those ways. And I've talked to a lot of friends who've toured either on that tour or on their own tours, on other tours. And they've really gotten into they've gotten into it as well. Obviously that's not a thing just right now. Though I think it's coming back like pretty soon. I think I really do. But anyway, yeah, you can have a lot of fun with those aspects, the living aspects of touring.
I mean, I'm sure it's like kind of a party, like when you're not on stage, it's kind of like, okay, what are we eating tonight? Like, what are we ordering? What pizza restaurant are we ordering from tonight?
Yeah, there's definitely like that balance, and I think it comes with what show you might be touring with as well. You know, I'd imagine it must be like a lot of fun to tour a giant ensemble musical with that kind of company camaraderie, so to speak. But you know, I also enjoyed that sort of closeness I was able to get with the smaller company on this particular tour. So I appreciated that as well. But yeah, it definitely, you know, it's a small family you have to form. I think that's just kind of how theaters and theater companies operate.
And Dear Evan Hansen probably forces you all a little more to be close, but in a good way.
Yeah, I think because you're working closely together on stage, and especially even with the understudies, the covers, you know, when they do go on, which is great because you get to kind of work with new people, and it shakes things up. So that's, you know, you're working closely with all these people, like you're saying, you're doing kind of close, vulnerable work with them. So you want to be, I think, close enough in a certain way.
What was the day you made your Broadway debut like?
It was wild because I had done the show so many times at that point, but it was like doing it in a different theater. I felt like we had moved to a different touring house, but the backstage traffic was set up a little bit differently, and I was with a slightly different company. And I remember like finally finishing my last change, and it was like at the end of Good For You, and I was just, all I had was the finale left, and I was like, wow, that was it, I did it. And like, and now I'm here. This is so crazy. And that was it. It was a very, very wild experience for sure. But it was very fun, and I definitely did not take it for granted. I think I definitely had a lot of fun with it, and I was kind of just happy to be settling into one spot.
Is there any song during the show, whether you're on stage or not, that you're like trying to hold back tears every night? Because Dear Evan Hansen is such an emotional show.
It is an emotional show. It depends on how I'm really watching or listening to it. I think there were enough times where I'd be like, maybe backstage and words fail is happening, and I'd be in a silly mood or just, chatting with someone, or like not
Paying attention.
not quite there, because I don't quite need to be. But then there have been other times where I've like watched it from either the wings or a monitor or something, and it's like, oh wow, this is really, this is getting to me. And it depends, sometimes, you like to do that for a friend's final performance, or sometimes you're just doing it, you trying to listen into the show just to kind of make sure you're still there, still in the world, because you don't want to tune out. I felt like my track definitely was going on and off stage a bit, which is nice because you get those breaks, but you want to make sure you're ready and you're on and you're in it when you do go back on stage. So again, I think that balance, of just finding that balance of, tuning in to the show, but obviously you might not be fully able to like fully be watching the show every minute you're not on stage. You might be changing or getting water or going to the bathroom or something like that.
How do you like make sure that when you come back on stage and re-enter the stage that you're not like laughing from like a joke backstage that you just heard, or like
that takes practice, honestly. I think sometimes it's easier than others, but like honestly, it's just, for me, it's breathing, centering. The show makes it pretty easy when you're literally on stage. There's like music going, and there's like projections going, and there's like this whole world they've kind of created for you that you can use. So I try and use all that stuff when I'm performing that show, because I think it's easy to use that and just be like, okay, I'm in this world now, and like, let me just focus, and like, okay, here's my scene partner, let me like put my attention on you and like say what I'm saying to you. I think that's kind of the best thing I can do. But yeah, it's true, like a joke or something might happen, and you want to make sure you're centered, and sometimes flubs happen. You don't want to be like giggling through a scene, but I know it's happened to me or others before. I'm sure it doesn't happen often, and that's why it's usually funny and it stands out. But it's kind of like this shrug of like, you just have to focus and like mature up and do your job, because I mean, it is ultimately a job at the end of the day. It's fun, it's great, but it's a job. These are all jobs. So,
and it mentioned that Dear Evan Hansen, like the characters are also 3-dimensional in it. How did your Jared change from national tour to Broadway?
I think over the course of the touring, the touring time I was on the tour, the character definitely kind of grew. I think he started a little like louder and maybe more in this kind of in this kind of outward energy, and we kind of humanized him just a little bit more and made him a little bit less of a caricature as we went through the tour, and as I kind of continued working with notes, and I kind of worked on doing a lot less, and I think part of it was like maybe trying to sort of almost play to these larger houses, but I kind of just kept doing less and less, which was nice. And I think by the time I was back on or in the Broadway company, I was kind of pretty humanized and centered, that Jared. So a lot of it was doing less for me. That's just what I kind of needed to learn for this character. I didn't need to work so hard. And I think the way he may have altered based on the Broadway company versus the touring company was just based on the different people I was performing with. like performing
Yeah.
from Ben Ross to Andrew Feldman they're obviously very different actors. So it was kind of just responding to different folks. And then Andrew left and Jordan Fisher came in just before everything kind of shut down. So even that was nice because we got this rehearsal process to sort of set Jordan into the show, and kind of work on those scenes together, and a lot of that book work together. So I think the way the character changed was also by the way the cast around me was changing.
That's interesting because I asked Gabby that when I interviewed her about like if like different Evans affect how she plays the character of Zoe. And I was gonna ask that, but I wasn't sure if like with your character it was the same, like different Evans affect like how you play your character too.
Yeah, it's mostly with Evan. Jared interacts with Evan the most. It's not so much with like a different Cynthia, just because Jared doesn't really interact with Cynthia much, I guess. But there still is that energy for sure, within the company at large. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it's mostly about those actors around you, and I wouldn't want to have the same performance, that's a carbon copy between one Evan and another. It wouldn't be fair to the Evan. It wouldn't really be fair to the audience. The job is a little more than just like showing up and saying those lines, and again, it's still being present and having that
Yes.
real communication with each other. So.
And I'm sure there's repeat audience members who like come to see like every Jared, every Evan, every Zoe.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, or I guess not surprised. There's some really super fans that do come to see each understudy perform, and they love the show, and it's really inspiring and touching. But they wanna, they wanna see different kind of performances. Yeah.
Speaking of fans, what's your favorite stage door experience or fan experience that you've had?
Oh my. I don't know. I loved the Broadway stage door. It got super wild and crazy when Jordan had entered, which was fun. But also it was fun kind of experiencing the stage door in all the different cities. Like in LA, it was pretty vibrant. I mean, really in all of them, now that I think about it, in Chicago as well, in a lot of these cities. I don't know. I enjoyed doing the stage door. I tried to do it when I could, if it wasn't like raining or anything, or too freezing. I don't know. It was very touching, the fans who would really they'd make artwork and all these different things. They were really like committed to being these devoted fans. I don't know if I have a singular like moment that really, really sticks out. But I definitely I enjoyed all of them, and it was very cool. I think the coolest was just seeing the different like kind of stage door setups kind of in each city, and how each city sort of responded differently. They would sometimes do these like blue hat nights in these bigger cities, sort of like hand out blue hats and promote the show. I think that was always fun, like seeing everyone out in their blue hats.
That's so cute.
That was very fun. Often on like an opening night in a city. I think we did it in LA and in Denver and all those cities, and you just see all these blue hats walking around. It was very funny.
That's so cute. I mean, the show means so much to so many people. I mean, because of like just how popular it got on Broadway. Like so many people knew about it by the time it went to tour.
Yeah.
What do you think made it so popular in the first place?
Oh, I think a lot of it was this this original story and the connection it had to kids or teenagers. I think a lot of young folks were resonating with it in ways they weren't with other musicals that were out at the time that this was also coming out and playing. So I think that was a big part of it for sure. I think that's why a lot of younger folks have connected with it, and then I think a lot of parents have taken their kids or young adults to it, and have also resonated with the family aspect or the parent aspect of the show as well. So it definitely is something that can cross several generations, which I think is important as well.
Definitely. And I'm sure that there's been some people backstage who have like come, like some celebrities backstage who you were like starstruck or excited to meet. Was there anyone in particular you were like, oh my God, this person has come to watch me perform?
Yeah, totally. That was really wild. Like Tom Hanks came in LA, which was really wild. And like the same day Troye Sivan came, which is also crazy. And then Zendaya came in New York, which was wild. So there've been a couple for sure that have been like, oh my God, like you saw me perform. And I think the weirdest thing with Tom Hanks was that like I think that was his first time seeing the show. So it was like, wow, your first experience seeing the show was with me in it, which is really, really wild to think about. But
Wow.
yeah, again, you try to just not think about it and you just do the show. And typically they don't let you know about something like that until after the show. And then they come greet you after and you're like, oh my God, Katy Perry was at opening. What? It's something really, really wild. But
Imagine.
I was trying to just not worry about all that and just kind of
Yeah.
not let that kind of get to me. But yes, thinking back into like the little kid in me is like, wow, that's really, really cool. That
Yes.
had to happen.
I was gonna say, imagine if they told you before.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't want to know before. I mean, some people do like that. They want to know. I think
Yeah. No,
it
no, no,
doesn't
no.
matter to me. Every show is a show, and like, I'm doing the show,
Speaking of shows, you mentioned earlier that you've been writing a new musical, which I saw in the bio on your website. So what is this musical called? I don't know how to pronounce it, and I don't want to pronounce it wrong and butcher the name. But what is it called, and how did the idea come up? And can you tease it a little bit?
Yeah, I'll just give you a really short kind of teaser, but Mazpan tells the story of two best friends who find themselves stuck in a magical town called Mazpan. And the town is completely entirely populated by singing and dancing Maisies of Mazcapan, who are all played by puppets. And think somewhere along the lines of Jim Henson meets the Lion King style. And basically, these Maisies see these two best friends, Ralph and Harry, and they say, "Oh my gosh, you don't look anything like us. This is it. You are what the prophecy has foretold. You are the Messiah of Mazcapan. You've come here to bring the rain and save us from the drought we've had for the past 100 years. You're going to make it rain." And they have to now assume the role of the Messiah in the town of Mazcapan and bring the rain. And a bunch of fun stuff happens that follows. There's the Mysterio of Mazcapan, who is the keeper of magic, who believes these two are who they say they are. There's the minister of Mazcapan, who believes they're not who they say they are, and is going to take them down and prove that they're imposters. There's the minister's daughter, who takes a liking to Harry. All classic musical theater tropes that I think are just delightful and fun. And it's really just a big, splashy musical comedy. And it's really just fun and joyous. And it's just a big old musical that we've really kind of believed in for a while and have been working on for a while and have gotten the incredible opportunity to workshop at Texas State University twice, which is really cool. And we're sort of in a brief hiatus moment with it, as all musicals are. We've kind of taken it to the best place it's ever been to, we'd like to think, as of now. It's obviously not done yet, but it is something that I definitely hold close to my heart and am excited for the future of it long term. And a lot of that is just kind of the patience of like, I'm a young 20-something-year-old and don't really need to focus on this musical just yet when musicals are not a thing just yet. But I am very, very much excited about it. And, it's one of those avenues of just kind of creating your own opportunity that I'm definitely an advocate of. It was fun being able to write a musical these past few years. It's been fun this past year writing some of my own music and kind of releasing that out into the world on like Spotify and Apple and those platforms. So again, it's like I was saying earlier, I think making your own opportunity, especially when it's not being presented to you. And, currently there's this yearning. Everyone wants an opportunity because it feels so scarce during this COVID time. So I think finding your own avenues is always a great thing to do if you can.
Can you talk about this music that you've released on Spotify and what's the process for writing music? I'm always so impressed with people who write their own music.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of this process, coming from writing a musical, it's so funny because it actually came off so much easier not having to make a song contextually, work in a certain way, and kind of just writing pop music. I found it to be a lot easier, even lyrically. I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to take you to such a heightened place the way musical theater does. But this, again, I had a lot of help from friends and folks who have worked, behind the scenes and are really good with that. Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, softwares that are even used in Broadway shows. Evan Hansen uses Ableton and a lot of these sounds as well. But yeah, and the help of artists, making these, fun album artwork covers, and kind of just working on my own like personal branding of releasing this music and kind of working toward a sound that I thought I would sing well and would suit me and sort of my overall character, genre type of person. I felt like for me, I'm not necessarily the type of person that would be most right singing a Justin Bieber or Harry Styles style song. Personally, I just don't know if it would fit me. But I think that, for example, the song Back on Track I released, it is something that does fit me, at least in terms of the sound and style. So I was definitely working toward that. Some of it is, I'm a sucker for horns, and we got a lot of live horn players to come in. Some might even think it sounds almost theater-y with that, even though a show like Dear Evan Hansen actually didn't even have horns, which is funny. But yeah, I think I definitely was inspired by some of those bands like Lawrence or even Dowie Jacek, or even like Donnie Trumpet, who's big with the trumpet. I wanted to kind of get back to this like old style of like Stevie Wonder. There's a bass, there's a guitar, there's drums, there's horns, there's vocals, and that's kind of just I like that classic style. Not to say that it's classical music, but I felt like it was sort of leaning into this almost jazzy funk R&B, cross of like theater meets, a band like Lawrence that, has this horn sound and this kind of live brassy sound. It might be theatrical in some way, but it's not necessarily theater music, if that makes any sense at all. But yeah, it's been fun, again, kind of finding that other avenue and just being like, I've always liked music. I have the time to do this now. I can focus on this just a little bit and kind of create a finished product that the world can see. Because like I was saying earlier with Mazkapan, or, a musical I'm writing, there are very few opportunities for that to be seen in its final, fullest form right now. So there was something really satisfying about being able to reach an attainable, tangible, like final goal of a song that's released, and like everyone can hear that final product and it's available to stream on Spotify or wherever you consume music, which I think is really cool. So,
and I'll put the links in the description.
For sure.
That's so exciting. Like, does it scare you a little bit before to like release music, or is it just like all like hype? Like, I'm ready for the world to hear.
It's a little scary, but I think it's also, beforehand sharing with a lot of people you trust and kind of just believing in it. And again, back to that, just kind of being true to yourself and like being your own self and not trying to be someone else. I think works well, that kind of philosophy. So I tried to just kind of stick with that like anything else. And I'm kind of proud of it for that reason. Yeah.
And the music you're describing, there's like less and less of it these days. So I feel like it's important for like people to keep making more, because
and in some ways it was almost an experiment to see if this is something people will like and will want and will or are still interested in. But I agree. I'd like to hear more of it. So I figured, why not make the sound I want to hear?
Yes, I love that. So I know you mentioned you'd want to be in original musicals earlier, but is there any role that's already been created that you'd want to tackle that's on your bucket list for the future?
Oh yeah, totally. There's a bunch of them. Like I've never played Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors, which like loving puppets and like loving kind of Alan Menken music and that kind of doo-wop style genre. I feel like it would just be so fun and delightful to kind of just be like devoured by a puppet on stage. So like I feel like that one's definitely up there. I've never played like Eugene and Bright Meach Memoirs. Like I feel like that would be a really fun one.
Okay.
I'd love to be in a Sondheim show, like Toby in Sweeney Todd even, or something in Into the Woods would be a lot of fun, like a Jack or Baker maybe if I was older. I feel like the bucket list could really go on and on, honestly. Definitely a Sondheim kind of fan nerd. So, like Merrily We Roll Along, Sweeney Todd, all those shows definitely, Sunday in the Park, definitely like are very much true to my heart and artistry, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I kind of am like, I feel like over the years I've sort of moved away almost from this like dream role aspect and kind of just like feeling like feather in the wind, roll with the punches. Like I'll whatever comes my way, I'll see and I'll do, and I'm kind of excited for whatever it is.
Yes, especially with theater being like not like live theater being non-existent pretty much right now. It's like, okay, you just want to get back to doing something and playing a role on stage.
Totally.
So to kind of wrap up, how do you work on self-confidence in this industry? Because it is such a tough industry. And I mean, you do get your fair share of like, no, maybe you're not right for this part, but you're going to be right for a part in the future that you're going to audition for.
Yeah, totally. I think, obviously getting, whenever you get a win, whenever an actor kind of books one job, even if it's a small job, it's one day on a set, whatever it is, I think that is always a confidence booster for an actor, artist. But again, I think it comes back to that reminder of always just like being true to yourself, and that you can be the best you. And it might not serve you for that one role, but it might serve you for that role. And kind of moving away from the whole like good, bad, should, better, worse, like who's to say, and like it's all subjective. So not taking things too personally. It's so funny because like, if you're acting, if you're on stage, if you're in a scene, if you're doing it, like the real craft is taking things personally. But the truth is the actor business side is like actually not taking things too personally. So I think that's always a funny balance that you see a lot of actors like either sway too much one way when they're in real life or too much another way when they're not in one life. So I don't know. I think that's just part of it.
And I mean, you mentioned theaters, crossing fingers, hopefully looking to come back soon. Like we see it, like the light at the end of the tunnel. What are you most excited about when theater does come back?
I think for me, I'm just most excited for everyone to come back to their seats, even if they're experiencing the same show, like Wicked, they'll all have been through this pandemic and they'll be on the other side and they'll be experiencing the show on the other side together. And I think that's kind of the cool experience,
Yes, I cannot wait. And where can people follow you on social media to keep up with what you're doing?
Sure. I'm at Jared B. Goldsmith with a B in the middle from like as in boy. And I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitch now. I'm on all the things. If you go to Instagram, you can pretty much find the links to everything as well. Spotify, YouTube, all that stuff. So it's there. It's out there. You can find me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for talking to me on my show today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Join. Thanks for watching this episode of Backstage with Becca B. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Becca B Talks TV. Or for more exclusive content from this interview and more, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Backstage with Becca B. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give me a 5-star rating. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.